Good afternoon. We'll get started in just a moment. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another week of lunch break with the rabbi at 1 p.m. And today we continue our discussions and discussing different customs and things in Judaism and thoughts in Judaism as we go through the different subjects. If anybody has any subjects that they would like to discuss or hear some answers to different things, feel free to email, text me, try to make that part of the discussion for the future classes. Also want to mention that today is the 20th of Av. It's a very special day as well as the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's father, I believe Yitzchak Schneerson, who was the rabbi of Yekaterinoslav, today known as the Nepi Petrovsky. He was a person who gave his life for the teaching of Judaism. He was a person who stood up to the communists, though the communists wanted to use him as a stamp to be able to push forward their agendas. Rabbi Yitzchak was a person who did not bend or buckle, and in the typical Schneerson stubbornness and pride of Judaism, was a person who persevered and was able to teach Judaism to the people of a city and continued until the communists sent him away to Kazakhstan, where there he was in exile in a place called Chile, and eventually, due to the harsh conditions there, passed away through a terrible illness that he was not able to survive in that exile. The Rebbe's mother in her diary discusses about his perseverance, that even while he was in exile, to help the Jews there, and his study of Torah, and he wrote his commentary on Kabbalah. He was a well-known Kabbalist. One of the very well-known things that he was also known for is, if you recall, the last well-known blood libel that was in Russia, which was called the Bayless trial. He was one of the experts, so to speak, to write a dissertation to the judge about explaining the concepts of Judaism and Kabbalah. And he was then appointed by the fifth Chabad Rebbe, the Reb Shalom Dov Ber, to represent and speak on behalf of Mendel Bayless. So he is a very great legend. He passed away the 20th of 1944, and may his blessing be a memory, and today's class will dedicate to his memory. Today we're going to talk about, being that we're coming from the concept of Kabbalah, we're going to talk about a world-famous and centuries-long question, is how is it possible that we as Jewish people believe that we have free choice if God knows everything? If God is the all-known, if he's infinite knowledge, and he knows everything that's going to transpire and happen, how then can we believe that we have freedom of choice? Now you may suggest and say, hey, maybe we don't have freedom of choice. If we don't have freedom of choice, then what would the meaning be of our actions? Are we just robotic? Are we just here plain following certain rules and our strings being pulled from above? And not only that, if we don't have freedom of choice, why then should we get punished for the decisions that we make or rewarded for the decisions that we make? Why then would it be a concept of repentance? That would be ridiculous if I'm just a puppet anyway. So there must be a concept of freedom of choice at some level, or else why would I be held liable for anything or any time? Well, to say that God doesn't know our choices at all, and then that we're just running this world haphazardly, then isn't God the all-known? Doesn't God know everything? Isn't God infinite? So which one is it? How can it be? Do I have freedom of choice, or does God know what's going on? If God doesn't know what's going on, then what makes him God? So what's going on over here? So one of the classic examples, and this paradox has been occupying thinkers for thousands of years, going back to even before Maimonides, and the classic explanation that was given is that because God is past, present, and future, God is living, so to speak, in the past, present, and future. Therefore, the choices we have already been made. The classic example that is given: if I know that you're going to cross the street, or I know that you're running or bicycle riding or doing something, my knowledge does not impede your decision should you cross the street or not. I know that you're going to cross the street. That doesn't change from the reality that you did or did not cross the street. So my knowledge does not impede your choice. The same idea is also God's knowledge, because he knows of what we are eventually going to choose. And the reason why he knows what we are eventually going to choose is because in his knowledge, or in his life, whatever you want to call it, in his area of things, we've already chose it, doesn't impede my choice of what I'm going to do. So our choices are not restricted by God's foreknowledge. Now, why is it so hard for us to comprehend such an idea? Is because generally, we as people look at knowledge as something which we usually understand. Knowledge, we look at something that we can intellectually comprehend, not something that's beyond our scope of understanding. And because of that, when we identify with a different type of knowledge, it automatically doesn't make sense for the human condition and therefore very difficult to comprehend. So in simplistic terms, the way the scholars looked at it was my choice is not impeded by God's knowledge. That means we are not living out God's script, but in essence, we are writing God's script. And what we do now becomes the knowledge of God that he envisions and sees that already happened in his sense. There are, of course, Maimonides expounds on this, and he looks at the paradox from different angles, and he says we can't limit God's knowledge, but at the end of the day, the choice and the concept, whether the theological question remains, and if we take it even a step further, which doesn't allow for such elaboration today, but the concept of divine providence within the pretext of freedom of choice. For example, that if I believe, as the Baal Shem Tov explains, that everything that happens in this world, from the smallest leaf turning over 4 times, is divinely ordained by God, how much more so my place and my position and where I am is of course ordained by God, then where is my freedom of choice? And therefore Hasidic interpretation explains, yes, God brings you to a destination. God divine, by divine providence, you end up being wherever you are. Now the choice is yours. What are you going to do? Are you going to make the best? Are you going to bring out the beauty and the richness that exists in the situation that God has brought you to? Or are you going to be a failure? And based on that is where you get the compensation for it, whether it's reward or penalization for the choices that you've taken. So to summarize, God's knowledge does not influence our choices. Our choice influences his knowledge. He knows our choice ahead of time, not because he imposes his choice, the choice on us, but on the contrary, because he sees the future as the present. Our free choice always remains a given. How God could foreknow, that remains a theological mystery because we don't understand the knowledge of God. As in the words of the Zohar, he is the knowledge without understanding what his knowledge is all about. Or in the words of Maimonides, God is the thought, he is the knowledge, and he is the known. He is the known, he will be known, and he knows. So he's all of them, he's all encompassing. So it's impossible for the human condition to even comprehend, to even make sense of what it means at such a level. The best we can understand it is put it an example as if you know the script of the play, but still the actors have to act it out. We're writing the script as they're going along. You can predict what they're going to say, but they're not compelled to do it. Now, of course, in the human being, there's always mess-ups and flare-ups. But with God, knowing that's going to happen, there are those mess-ups because he knows exactly what we're going to do. We're now going to segue that choice into a total different idea, something a little more practical. I'm sure you're well aware that when what is a Jewish toast, is when people say l'chaim. Where does the concept of people saying l'chaim come from? Why do people say l'chaim? Why, when they drink, say some wine or whatever it may be? Where does the concept and the custom come from of saying l'chaim? The word l'chaim literally means to life. Now, this concept of saying l'chaim, this drinking salutation of saying l'chaim, goes back all the way to Talmudic times. The Talmud says in the tractate of Shabbos 67b that Rabbi Akiva, when he would make a feast for his son, for every cup of wine that he poured, he would say, wine and life to the mouths of the sages. Wine and life and wine to the mouths of the sages and their students, which literally means l'chaim, which means to life. Now, while it's always nice to wish people life and health and all these beautiful things, but it became sort of some type of ritual that you identify l'chaim with Jewish people saying toasts. Like to extend today, you go over to any non-Jew, any Gentile, you ask them, what does l'chaim mean? It's a Jewish toast. What is it? Why is it? Why do we say l'chaim? Where does it come from? So, you'll even notice in some communities that when the person says kiddush, says the sanctification ceremony, blessing, or any time they say a blessing on wine, the first thing they say is savri meranan, gentlemen, let us get together, let us make a blessing. And everybody responds, l'chaim. Even Code of Jewish Law brings it down that this is not even considered an interruption, that generally we're not supposed to speak and before a blessing or after a blessing. However, when l'chaim is said, it is not considered an interruption. It is part of the kiddush or part of the avdallah or part of the blessing that everybody can say l'chaim. Why do we say l'chaim? To life. The Abu Draham, who was a commentator in the 14th century from Spain, you find a lot of his commentary explains on Agada and other different places of prayer. And he says the following example. And he says the reason why we say l'chaim is, of course, if you look in the Torah, biblically, the concept of drinking wine has not been associated with the greatest events. Starting with the tree of knowledge, according to some people, the tree of knowledge was a grapevine. And after tasting from the tree of knowledge, we know what happened to Adam and Eve. Number one, they were expelled from the Garden of Eden. Life for eternity was taken away. Painful birth was given to the wife. And so on and so forth with the different curses that came about because of the tree of knowledge. Going a little further in the book of Genesis, what else happened because of drinking wine? Noah, when he came out of the ark, the first thing that he planted was a vineyard. Drinking from the vineyard, he had a little too much wine to drink. And when he was drunk, that's when his grandson and his son have done some terrible acts to him as well. Going a little bit further, when the city of Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, Lot is saved in honor of Avraham, and he and his two daughters go away and they hide in the cave, and his two daughters get him drunk, and then they have the two nations of Ammon and Moab. So if we look in the Torah again and again and again, many times we find that wine is brought to situations to the opposite of life. Go all the way to the book of Leviticus. Aaron's two sons, according to one opinion, why did they die? Because they went into the holy temple intoxicated. So again, we see where wine has brought about something which of seemingly a negative. For that reason, the Abu Draham explains that when Jews then take a l'chaim, drink wine, because the Torah says we should sanctify the day of Shabbos with holiness with wine, or when it comes to a sanctification, any holy occasion, we always make a blessing on wine, whether it's Shabbos, whether it's the escorting of the Shabbos, or it's a bris, a circumcision, a pidyon haben, or a wedding, any ceremony, there's always wine, the grace after meals. Why? So when we make the blessing on wine, we promptly all together announce l'chaim, that it should be for life. Meaning to say that this occasion of drinking wine should be an expanded concept of bringing life into the world, not like unfortunately happened in biblical times. This, of course, expanded to all type of alcoholic beverages, which any time a person has that type of alcoholic beverage, therefore in which it sometimes takes the place of wine, l'chaim is also said, which we know. For this reason, why l'chaim is taking it a step further. Going back to our first concept that we spoke about today is choices. Abuse of alcohol drinking causes many different consequences. Unfortunately, consequences which cause the opposite of life as well. And for some people, l'chaim can be helpful for emotionally and spiritual ways. And for some people, under the right circumstances, it could be good. For some people, it serves to remind us that when we say l'chaim, l'chaim should bring about life, making sure that we should drink purposefully, not to drink abusively, not to drink just which may cause people danger or potential of pitfalls of healthy living. That we should remind us we say l'chaim. L'chaim is to bring life into this world. L'chaim is to bring joy. That any time we drink wine or any type of alcohol concept or any type of thing, this type of ritual, it should be about bringing life, and that the choices we make when drinking this wine should make sure that it brings about positive choices. That is why when a person says l'chaim, we respond L'chaim v'levracha, to life and to blessings. That we should always remember, when always we do something in life, it should always add blessings in life and bring life to others. So again, alcohol we see is part of this choice. It has a dual power to be destructive and to be spiritually uplifting. Saying l'chaim is a reminder that the blessing that we make on this drink should be done mindfully and purposefully, bringing life and blessings to all those around us. God bless you, and l'chaim, may you continue to bring life and blessings to those around you. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you back tomorrow, lunch break with the rabbi at 1 p.m. Again, for your questions and comments, feel free to text me or message me, and we'll try to continue and discuss those as well.